Rabies and Germs, welcome to NJ Today. My name's McConnaughay, and you're watching this on Mishmashers.com. For this edition, I'll be sharing my thoughts on Batman the Telltale series. As Rocksteady's Arkham series came to an end, Batman fanatics and casual gamers in general were wondering what would be next for the Caped Crusader. Would Warner Bros. Montreal try their hand again with a follow-up to Batman Arkham Origins? Or would the Batman character be given a chance to cool off, left to the Injustice series, while we awaited the next project? Turns out, we didn't have to wait very long, as in August 2016, Telltale Games began sharing their interpretation of the Batman character with their episodic point-and-click graphic adventure approach that has, at times, led to acclaim, like with the Walking Dead series, and at other times been the recipient of scrutiny, with some, for instance, regarding it as less of a game and more of an interactive graphic novel, which is only an insult if you regard an interactive graphic novel as a derogatory phrase, which personally, I do not. I like Telltale Games a fair bit when they're at their best, like, for instance, with The Wolf Among Us or Tales from the Borderlands, and I thought them given a chance to share their interpretation of the character would allow a nice change of pace, and in a perfect world, would allow Warner Bros. To give other superheroes a chance to take the small screen with video game adaptations. The dynamic of Batman the Telltale series is unique, focusing on the Dark Knight, but at the same time focusing heavily on the man behind the mask, Bruce Wayne. With all the moving parts at work, Bruce Wayne, voiced by Troy Baker, is the CEO of Wayne Enterprises, and through his wealth acts as a vigilante, assisted by his butler Alfred Pennyworth, as well as the head of technology at Wayne Enterprises, Lucius Fox. The episodic series asks various different questions, in particular, whether or not Thomas Wayne might have had a large-scale criminal past that included locking naysayers and combatants up, bringing a terrorist organization into fruition called the Children of Arkham, a new interpretation of the Harvey Dent character, and Oswald Cobblepot, as well as other familiar faces like Catwoman. In general, something about every Telltale series that makes it relatively simple to recommend or try to persuade against is to tell you that it plays a lot like other titles in Telltale's catalog. This isn't free world exploration, and it doesn't exactly have explosive action, instead geared more toward dialogue and the drama from the storyline itself. From a technical standpoint, however, Telltale has updated their game engine, boasting more polished, more detailed graphics, and it does feature its fair share of quick-time event-based action that is more toward interactivity than much else. Like many Telltale series, whether it's due to budgetary constraints or rushed production, Batman suffers from minor technical issues as well. If you've played other Telltale games, then chances are you're already in the know as to whether or not these aspects are for you, and if you haven't played them, stick around and see whether or not this is a worthwhile introductory to Telltale's brand. The storyline of Batman is a promising enough concept. The way they portray Oswald Cobblepot as an old friend of Bruce Wayne, and the way they show the character is unique from a lot of what we had seen from the character prior. And the masked character Lady Arkham, the leader of the Children of Arkham, is interesting as well. As interesting as the aspects are, however, front and center, a lot of what's depicted is familiar. I mentioned the Harvey Dent character being featured, and by mentioning that, everyone who is even loosely familiar with Batman canon is aware that Dent, at some point or another, becomes Two-Face. It's really a matter of when, and not if. Although I wouldn't consider Two-Face as amongst my favorite of the Batman villains, I've never really minded him. But in my opinion at least, his character, in its current state, doesn't have a whole lot of mileage, and his origin has been well treaded and was never all that interesting from the get-go. Telltale adds some of its own flavor to the concept, but it doesn't buck off a lot of the convention already established with the character. The dynamic I mentioned earlier in regards to them focusing more on the Bruce Wayne character is an interesting prospect, but as I soon discovered amid this, I think a lot of it made for a more ho-hum experience than I would have liked. A lot of this is because, although we've never had the depictions as the main aspect of a Batman game, a lot of it has already been covered, and Telltale doesn't bring its A-game as far as presenting them in a way that makes them worthwhile. Something about the dialogue and the characters themselves feels workmanlike, transitional in some respects. Whereas in their previous efforts, like fellow DC game The Wolf Among Us, the writing and the dilemmas themselves were enough to keep me invested through and through. The situation with Telltale's Batman series is a strange one to be in. Although Telltale is a game developer built from the ground up, as being more about storytelling than gameplay elements, the anomaly is in the unique way that this Batman game doesn't deliver in the crucial element of making me care about the characters in a real, unique way. And part of this is perhaps not Telltale's fault. The atmosphere and setting is up there with the best of the Telltale catalog, and the graphics have never been better, especially for a reasonably priced experience as this. The characters are voiced particularly well, and the concept itself intrigues. With the many twists and turns it has, all the moving parts it has, reading a synopsis for each episode, I would have thought this sounded like a solid Telltale experience. But yet the problem is directly with the writing and how, even though many of them are well known from the Batman canon, that isn't enough to make them interesting characters, and more often than not, it plods and fails at keeping me invested. Batman the Telltale series isn't an awful Batman interpretation, and it paves the way for better, more ambitious work later on. Unfortunately, this first season feels like a rushed, almost detached debut for the incarnation of the world's greatest detective.